Alrighty.
Great, great. And we are live. All right, guys. Well, welcome. Uh, we're just going to have a discussion with Joey. He's a theist. He believes in God. We know him from TikTok. You guys may know him. Um, but yeah, let's have a great discussion here. So, what do you got for us today, man?
Well, I thought it'd be fun to start off with the evolutionary argument against naturalism, because most theists are dealing with probably don't believe in evolution, and I think that's probably where we're going to agree the most.
Okay.
So, the evolutionary argument against naturalism basically says that, over time we've evolved just like evolution, uh, but evolution isn't there to help us, gain what's true. Evolution, it's based on survival. It's based on, natural selection and random mutation. So we could end up believing in things that aren't necessarily true, uh, simply to survive. It doesn't necessarily matter if, what's chasing you is a bear or a magic flying saucer. Something's chasing you. You need to get away from it. That's obviously a very, simple example, but this goes all the way into our rational thinking. Can we really trust our rational thinking if our cognitive, facilities are there for survival and not reason?
Okay. So the argument is basically, well, we can't know truth if under naturalism, given evolution, we can't really know truth because we evolved to for survival. Okay. Well, I would counter that with saying, sure, we evolved for survival, biologically speaking, but in terms of our beliefs didn't evolve. Our beliefs don't have biology to them, right? They're just signals in our brain. They don't evolve. So although although we evolved to survive, our thoughts, our beliefs are dependent on our senses and our brains, really. Um, but the thoughts we have are really independent, or the beliefs we have are independent of our biology because they're not biology themselves.
So you would say that, our thoughts are based on, uh, our brains and our senses, but how did we acquire those senses?
Well, again, like we evolved our senses, we evolved our brains, but the point is that our beliefs don't get inherited. As we like my ancestors don't have the same beliefs I do, right?
Right.
The reason is because I don't. It's not the biology. Like my beliefs are not based on my biology. It's based on new information, new sensory information, new experiences, new reasoning, and that doesn't come from evolution. I don't evolve new beliefs. Beliefs don't evolve, right, themselves. So beliefs are independent of our biology.
Ooh, I wouldn't say that though, because if our beliefs are coming from these new sensory experiences, our biology is how we're going to interpret, or not how we're going to interpret, but how we're going to process these stimuli. So it definitely, I would say, has a big part to do with our biology. I understand where you're coming from, though. Obviously, our beliefs aren't, part of that.
Yeah. So the point is our beliefs don't matter when are independent of our biology. Sure, we evolved to have certain senses and certain brains, but the point is that our beliefs, the beliefs we hold, not only are they independent of our biology, but we can verify our beliefs to be true. Like we can test our beliefs, right? If I believe the earth is flat, we can debunk that.
Right.
Right? It doesn't matter what my biology is. It doesn't matter if we care about survival, right? We can use our reasoning and senses to come to truth alone. You don't need any kind of God or anything like that.
Okay. Okay. We can we can move on to the next one.
Okay.
So I've just kind of wrote down a list of arguments for God. A couple of these are, very common ones. The Kalam, uh, everybody's, favorite. Uh, we obviously don't need to go over the whole Kalam. We've went over this,
Yeah.
but I've made a little bit of a tweak to it that I think is beneficial for theists that I wanted to try to talk to you about here. Instead of arguing that the beginning of the universe is evidence for God, I still believe in a beginning of the universe. I think it's better to argue just that the Big Bang is evidence for God. Now, obviously, that's where we would disagree. So I would use the same logic that theists would use for the kalam. It needs a cause, and I'm not going to put it into like a deductive argument format because we don't. It's not a debate. But what would you say to that?
Well, in order for something to be evidence, you need it to be it needs to point to some conclusion specifically and no other conclusion. I think that would make good evidence. It also has to be verifiable in some way. So if you're going to say that the evidence of God is the Big Bang itself, well, how? In what ways is it evidence of a God? Because the Big Bang could have been caused by something within the universe. The Big Bang simply describes the expansion of the universe. So that could be caused by dark energy, which is within the universe. So even if there was a cause to the Big Bang, it doesn't mean that it has to be God. How is that evidence?
Okay, so well, we know that the Big Bang. It's hard to say prior because time doesn't really. There is no time in a singularity, but there was a singularity, and that singularity expanded. So theists would argue that the most likely explanation lies outside of the singularity, which is very similar. Like if God created the universe, he has to be out. But for now, we're just talking about the explanation, the cause, and we would say it's outside of the singularity, and that the singularity, and the reason we would use this is that the singularity is time doesn't move in a singularity. There's no space, so it couldn't be limited to inside of that. It wouldn't work. Now, there's the whole quantum vacuum thing, but that's problematic in and of itself because the quantum vacuum it relies on it's something that goes on now. We don't know that that's something that was in existence prior to the conception of the universe, or if you just want to say pre-Big Bang, if you think there's a big crunch or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, again, like you don't need a pre-Big Bang. That doesn't need to be a thing. You can just have so in quantum mechanics, you can have a quantum state that is eternal. It doesn't have a beginning or like it's always happening. It just is. And the universe is somehow emergent of that quantum field or quantum fluctuation. So you don't need a pre-Big Bang. But if there was, again, I mean, just because we don't have an explanation today for it doesn't mean God done did it, right? You need that
Right.
extra evidence. You need that something that moves your argument forward. All you have right now is Big Bang, therefore God, right?
Well, I began to kind of lay out some argumentation that whatever caused this is outside of it. And then there's going to be the obvious. It has to be outside of time. This requires agency because it would be an uncaused first cause. It would be initially changeless. Now, this is obviously where we immediately run into disagreement, right? To say that the first cause has agency, that's implying it has consciousness. But I think that would be the point of disagreement. If something is initially changeless and then it changes, I would argue that the only way that it can do that is on its own accord with agency.
Yeah. So there's a lot of objections to that entire argument. But even if I were to concede to an agent, well, how would it be that the agent can change being changeless? Like it seems like to me the property of changelessness means it can't change at all.
Initially changeless. So that
right, it doesn't
in order
matter.
to be an uncaused first cause, it has to be initially changeless, because if it's changed, that means it's caused by something else. So it has to be initially changeless.
Okay, but even if you have an agent, I mean, obviously, like humans, when it comes to humans, there's something that influences my choices, right? There's something outside of me that influences my choices. If we take that to God, well, wouldn't it follow that there'd be something that influences God's choices, or something prior to his choice that caused it to be that way? And it seemed like we would have an infinite regression.
Well, there would have to be an infinite regression if we're going with what you're saying, because if you're going to say, right, let's say God created the universe, just for the sake of this, and something caused him to do that. Well, what caused that, right? And we could keep going back, and that's obviously that's not helpful. That's not going to help us figure out what's going on. And mathematicians, I don't know where you stand on an actual infinite, but like mathematicians have basically determined that this sort of thing is impossible in the reality that we live in.
Okay. Well, I don't know about that actual infinite, but I know in infinite regression, there's no logical contradiction in infinite regression at all. It's a very logical possible thing. But again, like the God thing doesn't escape that. Like you can have an agent, but the agent, whatever, like I said before, there's something that caused that agent to make that decision. There's something that influenced that. So it's the point here. The point I'm trying to make here is that adding a God doesn't solve the issue that you're trying to solve.
We have,
You
I
know.
mean, we're not adding God. We're simply talking about a initially changeless cause.
Well,
And
okay. Well,
I'm saying
positing God
that he
doesn't
would be
solve
the
that.
best explanation for that. So
Okay.
if we're just looking at the initially changeless cause for a second, right? Uh, there is no infinite regress there. Whatever this initially changeless cause is initially changeless. Nothing is causing it to act in any particular way. We don't know what it is right now. We're simply so to say that there's something influencing it once we add God into the equation. That's we don't have any reason to think that that's ad hoc.
Yeah, but the point, I don't know if maybe the point is that in order for an agent to change, it needs some prior change. Would you agree? It needs some prior cause.
Not if it's initially changeless.
But there has to be something that influences that change. Like if I were to make a decision, there had to be something that influenced that decision.
Well, yeah, but
It wouldn't just be
you're
me, right? It would be something outside of me that influenced me to make a decision.
right, but
That's just
we're
my
not
critique.
talking about like you making a decision in temporal space. This is before there was time. We can't even say before. There's no time here. We're talking about something that this had to be the first cause because temporally speaking, nothing was before it.
No, yeah, no, it doesn't matter about time. I can agree that there's a without we can take the B theory and still say that there has to be some prior cause. Like causation isn't always temporal. It could be causation outside the temporal world. But the point is that there has to be some prior reason for that, for it to make a decision. I just don't see how you escape an infinite regression by just saying God suddenly makes the choice.
Well, if it's a infinite regress, that would be a problem, but it's not because it's an initially changeless cause. So if it's initially changeless, there is nothing prior to it. There's no change, nothing influencing it.
Okay.
But
But
I,
yeah,
I
I
feel like
mean,
this is one of those things we're gonna like kind of go back and forth on.
yeah, yeah.
So we could move on if you want to.
But but what I will say that I mean, we can just escape that entire. We don't even have to get into the God thing in that case. We can just say the universe is eternal, or you don't need a God at all. But you can go ahead.
Yeah, the theist would come back with all sorts of for third law thermodynamics and whatnot. I have a fun one here. So the moral argument, right? Morals are objective. Uh, I have the beauty argument here, and I haven't had a chance to really talk to anybody about this. So I was hoping to hear your take. So this argues on a couple of different levels. The first one is an attack on naturalism, which is basically just to say that there's certain things that we find beautiful that, according to evolution, we really shouldn't. Volcanoes, lions, things that are dangerous. I don't tend to argue this as much because obviously I believe in evolution, so there's really no point. But what I do like is the argument from objective beauty, that if there's a standard of objective beauty out there, uh, there must be something that set that standard. And, obviously this would take us to God. Uh, what do you think about that?
I don't see how it gets to God. I mean, beauty is always going to be subjective. I mean, yeah, you need a mind for beauty, but we can ground beauty in the minds of humans. Like what we call beautiful is something that we subjectively think about, right?
Mhm.
You don't need a God for that. Like I don't see how you can have an objective standard of beauty. What would that even look like?
Right. And when I first heard this, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, well, what if these people are getting kind of out of hand with these arguments? But I think this is actually one of the best arguments for God. Well, maybe not one of the best, but I think it's one of the more interesting ones. So, Mike, you would agree that on some level it would be pretty wrong of me to say that you are ugly. We tend, as humans, we tend to attach some level of morality to beauty. You know, if I say my wife is prettier than yours, if your kid, I don't know if you have kids, if your kid makes a painting and I say, oh, this is hideous, we tend to attach some level of morality to things that are beautiful. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Or even like an example, like something I think of a lot when we see like, artwork vandalized. You know, if somebody vandalized the Mona Lisa, I have no intention of going to see the Mona Lisa, but it would still be like, oh, why'd you have to do that? You know, it's a beautiful piece of art. We've preserved it. Um, I think that, beauty in general, even though everybody has their own preferences, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not objectively something there. And Plato, which, this is a long time ago, he argued similarly to this. And something that he said was that it's not that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, it's that beauty is something that we just haven't learned about, similarly to morality. So Plato thought that our versions of what we thought was beautiful was simply at the time what we knew to be beautiful. But as humans progress, similarly with morality, this gets more and more advanced. So would you?
So,
So he's saying that beauty is objective, but to us it seems subjective because we haven't learned it yet. And this would
okay.
explain why humans seem to have so many differences in what we think is beautiful.
Okay, but how would you know that there is an objective standard for beauty? How would you get to that standard? How would you know there even was one?
Well, it, remember what I said about we tend to attach a certain level of morality to beauty.
Okay.
So that is outside of uh, aesthetically pleasing things, right? Uh, Go back to the example with a kid, right? If a kid makes you artwork, let's be honest, it's not pretty, right? We have a sentimental value because the child made it. But in most of these cases, we're not looking at, like a Picasso. We're looking at a piece
Hmm.
of, scribble or whatever. But if you were to rip that up in front of the kid, that would be horrendous. That would be terrible. Uh, and this is where I argue that there is an objective standard of morality because anybody can look at the painting that the kid made and say, okay, that's pretty, that's not pretty. Um, but everybody sees you ripping that painting up. Everybody sees you burning a museum of paintings down, and they see that as an act of immorality, whether or not they find it aesthetically pleasing or not.
Okay. But I mean, this would obviously presuppose that morality is subjective as well, right? I mean, we can just reject that and say morality is
Yeah,
subjective. It's all subjective. We can,
right.
I don't see a reason why we have to hold to what you think.
Well, then we would spend the rest of the time arguing, for objective morals, and that's the only thing I haven't really enjoyed about the beauty is that you end up spending just as much time arguing for objective beauty as you do that beauty is evidence for God, because virtually everybody thinks that it's subjective. But I really just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. I thought that was a really interesting one. Onto the moral argument, I guess, which objective morals. What's you think morals are subjective, correct?
Yeah, I'm not only that, but I'm also a moral anti-realist, which means I don't believe that there are moral facts in the world. I think you can't get to moral facts. Not only there's no evidence of any moral facts, but you can't get to them. I think morality is subjective. Yes.
So when you say like moral facts, what do you mean by that? Like you shouldn't kill people, stuff like
Yeah, like you can attach, like you can just say, hey, thou shalt not kill people or murder, and we can say, well, that's a fact, right? We can know this for a fact that this is wrong. That would be a moral absolute, moral fact.
okay, and you would say that those don't exist.
No. They don't exist.
So why do we arrest people? Like if I go and I murder or I rape somebody, I would go to jail, right? Why is that?
Because in our society, we've agreed that murder is wrong. We all agree that murder is wrong. Doesn't make it objective. It just means that we simply agree as to how we want to live, how we prefer to live in our society. So, yeah, in that view, morality is just preference based. It's just whatever we want and how we want to live. That's all.
Give me 1 second, Mike. I just gotta fix my All right, I think we're good. Okay, sorry about that. So you would say that we agree because we all agree upon it. So
Yeah.
what about those who don't agree? Or what if we were in this, and I'm sure you've heard this, what if a society developed where humans decided murder was okay? Would it be okay in that society?
In that society, sure, but we don't live in that society, right? It's hard to imagine a society that would think murder is okay. But the point is, I mean, morality is always going to be preference based. If the people disagree, I mean, that's just their preference, right? Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, he thought it was okay to kill, murder, eat people. Like we would think he was crazy, but he thought he was normal. He thought he was fine. He thought it was good. So to me, that's just more evidence that morality is up to our own preferences.
Well, if that's the case, then if morality is just up to our own preferences and this Jeffrey Dahmer's idea of what's right and wrong is just his idea of what's right and wrong, how do we establish any truth at that point? I mean, wouldn't you say that that's...
Well, I mean, we don't establish truth when it comes to morality. What we do is we say, hey, this is how we want to live. We want to care about each other. Generally speaking, that's how we want to be. We want to live in a world where we don't murder, we don't rape, right? Because that's how most people think.
Right.
So that's all. I mean, we've kind of like built this little paradigm, this little bubble for our society there, where we make up laws. I mean, for example, if I put the speed limit on a road as 50 miles an hour, well, we all agree that's the 50 mile, that's the limit, right? You can't go above that. Anything above that, you get a ticket for it. But entirely, that speed limit is entirely subjective. Ultimately speaking, it's subjective. We can act as if it's subjective, right? We can act as if it's wrong to go 51 miles an hour, 55 miles an hour on that road, but ultimately it is subjective. So I don't see how you can possibly get to an objective standard outside of the mind. Like objective meaning outside of minds, right? So I don't see how that's even possible.
Well, I'm listening to what you're saying, and then I'm looking at what we know to be true, we know, right? If evolution's true, let's just say for a second naturalism is true. I don't know what's going on. My phone is charging and then not charged. If I disappear, it might be because my phone is dying, but I should be good. So if we assume that naturalism is true, right, and all of our morals are essentially, survival mechanisms. We've developed these senses of morality, empathy, to look out for each other, to help, natural selection and whatnot. How can we say that anything is actually wrong?
You don't.
Like,
We don't say anything's wrong.
But Mike, we know that it is, right? Like
No,
you and
no,
I.
no, no. No, we don't know that it is. We
do. When you see something like 9/11 on TV, right? When that happened, everybody felt it. Everybody together. There's even talks today about how the country was unified. When terrible things happen, we know that these things are terrible. To just say that we think they're terrible because it's our preference, well, even I would go as far as to say even the terrorists who committed these acts, they knew, that what they were doing is what they wanted to do. It doesn't change the fact that they knew that there was something wrong with killing all those people, and that's why they did it, because they knew that it would be a bad thing, to do. It would cause harm to many people. So a lot of times when people do things, it's not because they don't think that it's wrong. They know that it's wrong. They're doing it for that reason, right? If you and I are talking and I get upset and punch you in the face, which I would never do, but if I did, I would be doing so because I know that that would hurt you, that that would be wrong.
Yeah, and then so you can say harm is bad, but that's subjective. Why is harm bad? Why is harm bad?
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
I'm saying
Because
it's
we
not.
know that
I'm
it's
saying
like if I
I'm
punch you in
saying
the face. Oh, you go ahead. I'm sorry, Mike.
what I'm saying is yes, harm we think is generally bad. Right? We all agree that harm is bad, but it doesn't make it objectively bad. Just because we agree as to the harm being bad doesn't mean it's objectively bad. And in the case of the terrorist, they didn't know it was bad to do that. They thought it was harmful. So for them, harm was good. That harm was good to them, to those terrorists, right? They used the Quran, by the way. So, yeah, I mean,
That's a
morale.
different debate, Mike. But
The point is that harm, why is harm objectively bad to you?
well, I would say that harm is objectively bad to anyone, but I'm not just specifically pointing to instances of harm. I'm pointing to instances that we all know are immoralities.
Give one example where we all know that this is wrong.
9/11, the Holocaust is a good one. Actually,
How
we'll go
about,
with
okay, well, how about Hitler? Hitler didn't think it was bad. I mean, the Nazis didn't think it was bad. Like,
does that make them? Does that mean that they had reasoning or logic behind that? Was there? Did they have legitimate reasons to think that it wasn't bad?
yeah, everybody has their own reasons as to why things are good or bad. The point is that it's all subjective. This is what I'm trying to get to you. Like, how do you know something? How do you know that 9/11 was objectively bad outside of the human bubble? How do you know that?
Well, Mike, I mean, I don't really know how to explain that. I think
Well,
I think
I mean,
I'll concede on this one. I'll concede on this one because I don't think there's a way to explain, in terms of logic why 9/11 was bad. I think it's apparent to us. We know that that's the case. Uh,
yeah, a lot of people, a lot of theists will say that it's intuitive to us, right? And I'll use that as evidence for moral truths. But intuition is also subjective. It all comes back to the subjective person. So until you can verify to me and demonstrate to us that it was objectively bad to do 9/11, then I'll concede that you're right. But until then, I'm not going to be a moral objectivist at all.
okay. What do you think about the applicability of mathematics? I know you and Than discussed this on a live. I happen to be watching. So are you
Okay.
familiar with that argument?
Mathematical realism?
No, no, that's more of like a theory. No, I'm specifically talking like the fact that we can calculate the end of virtually any situation using mathematics. Anything moving in our universe, we can calculate. We can calculate, certain the existence of certain planets just using math, independently of actually seeing these things.
Okay, yeah, so I agree. There's laws of nature. I mean, obviously, the universe operates in some predictable, describable ways, but it doesn't mean that God has to exist in order for that to happen. You can have a natural universe where there are laws of nature, and that's it. They're just necessities. They're just brute necessities.
So you don't think it's at all unlikely that these necessities are the way that they are? Like you don't think it's at all because under naturalism, it seems that would be quite the coincidence uh, that mathematics applies so perfectly. I mean,
Well, mathematics is to me, it's not real. It's not a real thing. Mathematics is just how we think about the world and how we describe the world. Mathematics is how we think as human beings. So, I mean, we evolved this way to think this way. I mean, we evolved to seek patterns in the universe. But even if I were to concede that there has to be something behind that, there has to be some reason behind the laws of nature. Well, couldn't we say the same for God? I mean, God clearly operates by some laws we can describe mathematically as well. Wouldn't that make God tuned or finely tuned?
Well, what could you give an example of what you mean by law, like that God operates under laws that we would consider,
Well,
mathematical?
just as the universe has certain properties, we can describe God through certain properties, right? All knowing, all powerful, all loving, things like this. Well, I mean, obviously, if God has certain properties, it must act according to those properties, right?
No,
So God can do things that are outside of his nature.
no, I'm not following how you got from the universe to God. Like
The point
like
is,
I'm describing the. Go ahead.
the point is that the universe has properties, right? You agree?
No, no,
The
that's not
universe
the
has
point.
no properties.
Well, I mean, the universe has properties, but that's not the point of what I was saying.
I'm trying to make the analogy here, right? So the universe, if the universe has properties, doesn't God have properties, right? God has properties.
I wouldn't say that follows.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying it does. I'm just simply making an analogy here. Does God have
Yeah,
properties?
no, I don't think he does.
God has no properties.
No, I wouldn't say he does.
So so you have no definition of a God. You have a thing that has no properties. That's a non-thing.
Well, no, a, a definition and having properties that's two very different things. Uh, but the applicability of mathematics is kind of independent. This is like something I was expecting during like the fine tuning.
Okay.
I'm talking about like the applicability of mathematics. Like, like we can
The, the,
calculate. Go ahead.
the reason why math is applicable to the universe is because that's how we think about the universe. Like just like logic. The reason why logic works is because that's how we think about the universe. Like that's how we describe the universe. That's what mathematics is.
So
Math isn't a real thing.
if there's no conscious minds, you don't think that there's math, essentially.
No, no. Math and logic are mind dependent.
Okay. So there was a point when Earth had no conscious beings on it. If there are two trees next to each other, are there two trees, or is it something else because there's no conscious mind there to, because that's math, one
Right.
tree plus one tree, two trees. It's simple
Okay.
math.
So
But
right.
uh-oh.
So you good? You're frozen. Oh man, he froze, guys. But what I was gonna say was he's trying to make the point that if no humans existed, would there still be a tree in the woods, or would there still be, would things still exist? And yeah, reality would still be here, right? Reality is what grounds everything. But truth is descriptive of the world, right? Truth is a descriptor for how things work in reality, what we call reality. So you're making a false analogy there when you're doing this. What you should be saying is, does reality still exist without humans? And yes, it does. Does truth exist without humans? No, truth doesn't exist because truth is mind dependent. Truth is how we describe the world. So the universe does not care about if we are there or not. Yeah, exactly. The universe does not care, as far as I can see. Now, there might be, hey, Taylor, how are you? Now, there might be there could be some reason. I'm not discounting the possibility that there could be some reason behind the universe. But there's no evidence of that. I would love for that to be the case, but think about it. Why do we think that there's somebody behind the universe? Because that's how we think. everything we do, everything we do involves a reason behind it. Or why did this happen? Oh, because they were mad or because they were angry. Everything we do has a reason. So of course we're going to personify the universe and say that it's. I think he's back. Let's see if he can get back in here. I don't see his. So the universe wasn't made for me? Fortunately, no, it wasn't.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. My phone died. I'm talking to you on my desktop.
Okay.
So we were talking about the applicability of mathematics. Where were we in that? We said that math is man-made, right?
Yeah, but then you were saying that would truth still exist without humans?
Yes. So if there's two trees, or there's still two trees, or what do we have?
So again, when truth is a descriptor, so when you say are there two trees, that's only describing reality. So I would agree, reality would exist without humans or not. Reality would still be there. But what truth is, it is a descriptor of the world. So the truth wouldn't exist because truth is mind dependent. But the universe would. The reality, what we call reality, what we refer to by when we use math or logic, is still going to be there regardless of humans. Does that answer it?
Yeah, but it doesn't satisfy in my opinion, it doesn't satisfy the applicability of mathematics, because that you're right to an extent. Truth is an explanation, but we've predicted things with math, right? Like this isn't something that is just describing what we see. We've predicted things that we didn't know.
Yeah, because because the universe operates by certain laws. There are laws of nature. I do not deny that that the universe operates in predictable ways.
Yeah, but these laws of nature are almost irrelevant. Not irrelevant, but they're not. These discoveries that we've made aren't necessarily just based on the laws of nature. I mean, we've discovered solar systems, planets, purely on the basis of mathematics. We look at something like, light being shifted one way or the other, and we can determine, okay, well, we can't see it, but there's something there. And we can calculate exactly, the size of that thing and how much it's affecting the light. And we've used this to predict the existence of planets and stars, black holes even.
Yeah, but we don't use just solely mathematics there. We're also using physics. We're also using, physical things that we know of in reality. We're making inferences about our things we already know, and that's how science is done. And sure, math can prove things about the world, but only within the context of mathematics. Like I can't use math to prove that there's something in my closet, right? I can't do that. You need the empirical data for that. So math is a very useful tool because it's a descriptor of the world using symbols. It's a language. But in terms of the reality that we live in, I mean, you need the empirical evidence to back it up as well.
Well, actually, you could use math to prove that there's something in your closet. If you're looking at gravitational waves, photons, it's
right.
This is.
But you would have to also have some type of empirical data there to back that math up. You can't just use math.
The math is the empirical data. That's how we come to the conclusions.
No, the empirical data is something that we can verify, like in the real world, right? Something that we can test, we can see, observe, and measure. Math is
math.
Not. No, that's not math. So, do you know the difference between empirical data and mathematical data?
Well, why don't you explain it because I'm thinking that we're talking about the same thing and we're using different words. Like, obviously, empirical data is like evidence. That's not exactly the same thing as mathematical data. But when we're talking about finding something in your closet, the empirical data would be sets of numbers and calculations.
No, that's not empirical. That empirical is sensory data, right? Things that we can sense and measure.
Right.
mathematics is not something you can sense. It's just how we think. It's like a lot. It's like a logic. It's a language. But what the point here is that the point here is that I agree. The universe operates in specific ways that we can describe. I don't see where God needs to come into this. Why do you need? How does this explain to God, or how is this evidence of God?
Well, it's not it doesn't explain God. I would say that it's much more likely under theism than naturalism, and therefore strongly confirms theism.
Oh, okay. Okay, so in order to say it's more probable under theism, you'd have to give us reasons. Why is it more probable under theism that there is laws of nature?
Well, it's more probable that the universe would be organized in a way that makes sense
Why?
under theism,
Why?
because it's designed under theism. By its very definition, theism entails design.
Right, but is it also possible? I'm not discounting that, but is it also possible that you can have a universe that operates through laws of nature that are just brute necessities? There's no God required. It's just a universe, and there's beings within the universe that operate by the same laws and can understand those laws. Why is that so difficult under naturalism? Why is that impossible?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's impossible, but I would say that it's improbable.
Why? Why is it more improbable? Why is it more improbable?
It is. I mean,
Why?
none of
How?
these things have to fall into place. These laws of physics don't have to be the way they are. They don't have to match. There's nothing saying that one side of the universe needs to be the same as the other. That the speed of light, for example, needs to be a constant. There's nothing saying that. And in fact, this is a side point, but we can't even prove that the speed of light is a constant. We can make very reasonable guesses that it is, but we can't go to every single place and test that it is. There'll always be the possibility that somewhere it isn't.
Okay, well, that was irrelevant, but
Yeah, I know. I just mentioned that because I mentioned the speed of light.
Your microphone's crackling a little bit, but I lost my track. The point is that even if there are laws that operate in certain ways, even if there are physical constants of the universe, we can still explain that under naturalism. There can still be natural reasons as to why there are physical constants. You can invoke a multiverse. You can invoke all different reasons, natural reasons as to why. Or a quantum field. You can invoke reasons in naturalism as to why there would be these constants and why not others. You never need to invoke an agent or God or consciousness. So that wouldn't make naturalism improbable. The point is that we don't really know the probability of a conscious being doing it either. But the point is that all the evidence we have points to there being natural things. There is no evidence of a consciousness making things happen in our universe at all.
Right. So I'm not saying that it's more likely that God did it. What I'm saying is that under theism, the probability of the universe being organized in the way that it is very high. Under naturalism, it's very low. Look, Mike, just for a second, concede. Wait. Why don't we just take this where it goes, and then we can take a step back for a second, because I feel like we're missing the key part here. Under naturalism, I'm saying it's a lot more unlikely, right? It's a lot less to be expected that the universe would be mathematically the way that it is. I'm saying under theism, it's a lot more likely.
You can't make predictions with theism. You can't say anything with theism. Has no explanatory power. It has no predictive power. You can't just say under theism we would expect an ordered universe. You can't say that.
That's what I just said. And I mean, you can't. If you can say that about theism, I can say that about naturalism. We don't know that naturalism is true. You're just
I never said that.
Question.
I didn't say that either.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that the evidence points to natural things, right? When I invoke the word naturalism, what I mean is that there's no consciousness behind it. There's no agent behind it. It's just nature, right? And that's what we see around us. As far as that's what the evidence points us to. That there being just a universe. So, I mean, what you're saying is that there's a consciousness behind the universe, and because the universe is ordered, but why? Why would that make it more probable under? Because with theism, we don't know. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to let you finish.
We don't know what theism would entail because we don't know what a god is. You haven't defined a god. That's why
Oh,
theism has no explanatory power. Theism has no predictive power. You can't make
Mike,
a statement with theism.
I'm glad you said that. We should have started by talking about the definition of God. So what I'm arguing for is a theistic God. This is a broadly termed God. Let me pull up the exact definition just so we have it. All right. Theism states that the existence and continuance of the universe is owed to one supreme being who is distinct from creation. So that's what theism entails, that there's a being distinct from creation that is responsible for creation.
Okay,
So
what's
what's the issue with that definition?
I don't know what that is. What's a supreme being and what's creation? None of those terms make
Right.
sense to me.
Well, creation would be a word used to describe the universe as we know it. Under theism, if this being created the universe, that would make the universe creation. So that's what creation is
Okay.
referring to. A supreme being. Um, what's your question about supreme being? Supreme to what?
Yeah, supreme in
The
what way?
universe.
What do you mean by supreme? Like
Higher
supremely
than.
larger? What's in
Higher
what
than.
way is it higher? In what way is it higher?
Well, I mean, you
It's
can
a
keep
broad
asking
term.
questions, Mike, but it seems supreme. If
Right.
I tell you, if I say, like I'm supreme to you, uh, you would know that in some sense, I'm saying I'm better than you.
Yeah, but in what way, right?
Okay.
You can, in what way? Like
Well,
if
you
you
don't
said,
need a
I'm
specific way where it could be any
yeah,
way.
you would. I mean, in order to quantify it, in order to define it, you would have to say, well, he's better at me at chess or something, right? Then you could say,
What if
yeah,
I'm
that's
saying
that's a
I'm
good
better, and I'm not, I want to be clear, I'm not saying this, but what if I'm saying that I'm better than you in every way? I'm supreme to you. I'm above you.
in
Uh,
every way. Okay, so
yeah,
you're better.
I'm not
You're
saying, but you
I know,
understand
yeah,
the
right,
okay.
right. But you can say that, but that definitely doesn't apply to the Christian God, right?
We're talking about a theistic being here. We Christian God, who cares? Islama, who cares? It doesn't matter. We're talking about the Christian God. Or I'm sorry, a theistic God. My bad. See,
Okay. Okay.
we can argue for the
I
Christian
gotcha.
God on a separate, but right now we're just God.
Better in every way. Okay. Sure.
I'm not saying better. I'm saying a supreme in every way. I just think when you and I use the word supreme, we would tend to think better, above.
Okay. Okay.
So we have a definition of God.
Very, very loose definition. Very, very poor definition, but okay.
Okay. So we've went over applicability of mathematics, morals. What do you think about evil as a privation of good? Have you heard of that one?
I can flip that and say good is a privation of evil.
Right, right. But have you heard the argument that evil is a privation of good, and because of that, it's more likely that God exists and he doesn't?
How would that follow?
Okay, so if evil is a privation of good, that implies that there's more good than evil. Would you agree with that?
I guess.
Because this would make goodness ontologically prior to evil. It would have to be there before it. You know what? Does that make sense?
Right. But how would you know that, right? I can reverse that. Like I said before, we can just
Yeah.
reverse that.
Well,
But so
I can use lines of argument and reasoning to get us to that. But I'm right now. I just want to make sure you agree with that part of the argument.
okay.
So a reason that I would say evil is a privation of good. When people do evil, they do it in the darkness. People don't tend to do things, and when they do, it's very rare. We notice it. people don't kill people in broad daylight, and when they do, we notice it because evil tends to be a privation of goodness. When there's no goodness around to stop it from occurring, it happens. So you take a rape, for example. A rape very rarely is going to happen in broad daylight if there's good people around to stop it, if there's goodness around. But if there's no goodness around, the evil will be able to succeed. The rape will happen.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons I would argue that evil is a privation of good.
I still don't see if that would follow that just because there's more of it, that means it's ontologically prior. I don't see how that would follow, but
Well, no, I'm saying there's more of it because it's ontologically prior.
yeah,
Because if it's a privation of good, the good has to be ontologically prior to it.
right. But I don't see why simply the sheer amount of it equates to it being ontologically prior. I don't see how you can make that connection.
So if we'll use colors for an example. Say you have a piece of paper, and the piece of paper is green, except for where there's a black dot, right? That black dot is a privation of green on the paper.
Right. I agree.
And that's what I'm arguing about.
In that context, right?
Right.
But I mean, well, from your perspective, that's the case. But what if it's the reverse? What if it's really a black sheet of paper and there's just green on it? You know, what if evil really is prevalent around the universe, but it's just, you know, the goodness that's kind of covering it?
That's it. You know what, Mike? I gotta say that's actually a really interesting response to this argument that I've never heard. Like I've told a lot of people this, and I haven't heard anybody say that. That's really interesting. I'm not sure. I would say that it still would have to be a privation of evil. And the reason for that is what you're describing here about the piece of paper, right? Say the piece of paper is actually black, but the green is just covering up the black. You would see the green covering up the black. Like you would know that there's black and that there's green covering it up.
You wouldn't know there was black, right? So the point is that you can just reverse everything you're saying, and you couldn't tell the difference. There would be objective way of knowing if the sheet was black or green, right? That's the point here.
You could look at it. You could see which coat was applied first.
Well, you wouldn't be able to know that, right? Because
why not?
You can only see what you have in front of you with our senses, right? So we wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't have any epistemic access to that information. We wouldn't have any ability to know that because of the way are limited. Our senses are limited. Our knowledge is limited.
But that's not the case with morality. I mean,
it is the case. It's exactly the case. It's the same.
I don't think it is, because we've developed, morally speaking. I mean, 200 years ago, humans thought slavery was okay. Now we don't.
It doesn't matter. The point is that you would have to be somehow outside of the mind, outside the human mind, or outside. You would have to be in God's perspective in order to know what was objectively wrong or good. Just like the sheet of paper, right? It'd be like outside of a dimension to see if the sheet was black or green. It's the same thing. But just because there's what you see is moral progress, by the way, doesn't make it objective that it's better to not have slaves. That's just objectively speaking. That's just your opinion, right?
Right. But it's objectively different. We agree on
right.
that.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. In the same way, over time, humans have seen morality differently. Why wouldn't you be able to see this piece of paper in different lights? I understand this is an analogy.
No, that was not a good analogy. I don't know. It's difficult for me. It's kind of late, to be honest. Difficult for me to think right now.
Right.
Any other arguments? Any other good evidence?
I have a couple that I could go over, but I mean, if it's late, man, this is like a long conversation. Like I had one about medical miracles, um, one which I've been working on, that just the very existence of life, which I know, Mike, I know you hear that you think, but it actually is an interesting one. Contingency, DNA, fine tuning consciousness, uh, to name a few. But we could do this again sometime. This has been a pretty pleasant conversation. If you want to have another conversation, I'd be
Yeah,
happy to.
yeah. I will say about the DNA thing. People say that there's, I mean, I saw your video about the information thing. It's information. It is subjective. It's not intrinsic to DNA. There's no coding that's intrinsic to DNA. DNA is just a molecule. We
Mhm.
perceive it as coding, right? So humans subjectively describe things via code. We can describe any system via code. I can describe weather as a code, or I can describe any system with
Right.
that has predictable patterns within it as coding. So that's why just the sheer existence of code doesn't make it a god, or doesn't make it intelligence behind it. I mean,
Well,
outside of human minds.
what do you think about, really quick? I know you said it's getting late. I say that DNA, it's not just a code, right? I mean, DNA, it's receives a message, right? We'll call it a message just for the sake of this. It receives a pattern, we'll call it,
Hmm.
and then it acts upon this pattern, and in terms of self-replication. And that's what I'm arguing, that acting on the pattern.
Yeah, that's just chemistry, right? That's just
Well,
natural
that's what we
laws of
call
nature.
it, studying it, but you, I'm saying that this is unlike anything else, right? We've never seen a situation where something receives a pattern, acts according to that pattern, in the same way, leading to the same results.
Literally every organic molecule works this way. Like it
Yeah, because there's DNA. I'm saying outside
no,
of that.
no, like organic molecules that are not DNA, like work like this. It's just organic chemistry. It's biochemistry. But yeah, I mean that's another discussion for another day.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, Mike, I really appreciate you doing this, man.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate you being here. It takes courage to talk to me, someone like me. So really appreciate that, man.
Oh, absolutely. I
It's
was
good.
looking forward to it. We should do this again. We could finish off. We could top off some of these arguments.
Yeah, great. Sounds good.
All right. Have a good one, Mike.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe and stay tuned for more.